All right, bro, we're
Ooh.
rolling.
Oh, shit, okay.
Count us down, bro. 3, 2.
Oh.
You're listening to Missing Out with Lex Michael and Tari J. Let's start the show.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Missing Out. I'm Tari J.
I'm Lex Michael.
And if this is your first time listening, what we do here is we introduce each other to different media, whether it be movies, TV, music, spoken word, books, experiences, things that have built us up as people. We share that with each other, we share that with you, the audience, and hope it builds you up. We are the retrospective that is introspective.
I like that one. That was a nice tight pitch.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's how I do, bruh.
Hell yeah.
Speaking of pitches, we're starting a new little thing. One would call it a segment called The Pitch.
The pitch.
The Pitch.
We're pitching.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, this is exciting.
So we gotta. I mean, people know what we're talking about based on the title, but you gotta get them pumped for it. You gotta get them psyched. So like, yo, bruh, pitch this movie.
All right. So today we are talking about one of my favorite films of 2018. Panos Cosmatos, director of Beyond the Black Rainbow from 2010, took every image he loved from heavy metal album covers, a healthy dose of fantasy, a barrage of violence, and the Nicolas Cageiest performance that Nicolas Cage has ever Nicolas Caged. All of that goes into a blender. He hits frappe and pours you out a delicious smoothie called Mandy.
That sounds tasty and real chunky. The chunkiest.
The chunkiest.
The chunkiest of
really,
movies.
They call it a chunky Panos, is what they call it.
Yeah, that's what I usually get when I go to Jamba Juice.
The chunky Panos.
The chunky Panos.
So what you really get when you go to Jamba Juice is a lot of confused stares.
A little bit. So yes, we're talking about Mandy, which this was my first time seeing it.
Yes.
And you've seen it already. I think you saw it in theaters, right?
I did not. I caught it at home. I wish I'd caught it in a theater. The theatrical release was very limited and very brief.
Yes.
So most people who caught it on VOD.
Yeah, I had heard that the fact that it had run its VOD course was why it wasn't eligible for like Oscars and things of that sort.
And not for nothing, man. In a world where Bohemian Rhapsody wins big at the Golden Globes, like, where is all of the recognition that, in my opinion, this movie deserves? But like the stuff that's going to win at the Academy Awards this year, Black Panther aside, in my opinion, Mandy's a far more interesting and, dare I say, better film than any of them.
Interesting.
In my opinion.
That's a pretty hot take.
It is very much one of my favorite movies of last year. In terms of, and for me, and of course, what makes a good movie is subjective.
Yeah.
You know, no movie, no matter how well-crafted, is going to work equally well for every single person. So if that's what you mean by perfect movie, yeah, there is no such thing.
Right.
When I say perfect movie to describe anything, it's usually a movie that I'm describing.
Right.
When I say perfect movie, what I mean is more the sense of goals set versus goals attained.
Yeah.
And in terms of goals set versus goals attained, I would argue that Mandy is a pretty perfect movie.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it is the best execution of what it was going for.
And now what it's going for may not be your thing in the slightest, and I understand because it's going real hard for a lot of real crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I so sorely miss that from most entertainment now. I miss people that are artists that are unafraid to, and of course given the room to go for broke that hard. Yeah. And it was because of the relative success of Beyond the Black Rainbow that producers were really interested, sight unseen, in being a part of whatever he did next. Producers including Elijah Wood, who's a really big, he ain't just a Hobbit, kids. He's, of course, a producer in his own right and a really big horror guy. So a bunch of producers went, yeah, after seeing Beyond the Black Rainbow, whatever you're doing next, we want to be a part of. And this script, which if I'm not mistaken, he'd been developing on and off since 2006, and in its final form, he co-wrote with Aaron Stewart on, is Mandy, and that became his next project.
Yeah, I had read that essentially when he was first developing the idea, he approached Nicolas Cage as the cult leader.
Yes.
And Nicolas Cage was like, no, I'm Red. And he was like, no,
right.
It was young versus old. And so he had Elijah Wood in mind. But then over time, like his perspective changed. in terms of like what the core of the story was about, and also like Nicolas Cage had a better pitch. As opposed to just being like, I want to play this guy.
Is that your Cage?
Yeah,
I kind of like that.
Thanks.
Gotta find the page.
Yeah.
Wait. Can you tell me that you're more of a treasure protector?
I don't even know what that's referencing.
It's National Treasure, bro.
Oh, is it? I've never seen
More
that.
of a treasure protector.
Ooh, that's a good Cage too.
Yeah, my Cage is very spotty. Occasionally, I can.
Damn it! You got me. You got me before it.
I hate us both. But yes, so in transferring over Cage to the red role, you're able to bring in Linus Roache as Jeremiah, and I think he is spectacular in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody across the board is pretty excellent. I don't think there's a weak link in this cast. Of course, the movie is carried by Cage and Roache and also Andrea Riseborough as Mandy, and I think everybody is... I will go so far as to say transcendent in their performances in one way or another. They're not all transcendent in the same way, certainly. But I would argue that each of them in their own way is transcendent in this film.
Yeah. Everyone is acting at the top of their abilities. Everyone is really diving as deep into their characters as they can. I have to be upfront in that, like, I'm not a big revenge quest movie person.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are very samey.
I mean, well, I think my big thing, and this is a weird thing to say as like a person of color, but like I always just want a scene where they're like, they go to the police and then the police are like, we can't help you. And then they're like, I guess I got to take it into my own hands. I just want something like that. Because like you have to work within the system and then you have to take it. Like I sometimes, you know, or sometimes I feel like there's a step missing between the person being wronged and the person seeking revenge.
It's like revenge is the very, like, bloody revenge by their own hand is the very first thing they go to.
Right.
No, I totally get that. My counterpoint in this case would be I don't think we're meant to assume the rules of this world are identical to the rules of ours.
Right.
Decreasingly so as the movie goes on.
Yes,
but I
think
immediately in the movie, the way that they are executing the story on a technical level, it's very otherworldly. It is very much in an existence that feels of its own. And Panos Cosmos, there's a really great... I wish there was more supplemental content on the Blu-ray, but there's this surprisingly substantive 22-minute behind the scenes. And one of the things he's talking about is, for him, story is not what's interesting. Story is a device, essentially. But what is most interesting to him is the way in which the story is told. Okay. And I think that's pretty evident when you look at the story of Mandy. The story of Mandy is very simple. The story of Mandy is essentially Red and Mandy are in love, very much in love. And one day Mandy is wandering out in the woods, and this van drives by her, and the cult leader, Jeremiah, sees her, becomes very transfixed on her. They abduct her. They cannot essentially convert her to part of the cult, so they murder her, and the rest of the movie is Red's roaring rampage of revenge.
Right.
It's not a terribly complicated story. The way the story is told, going back to, I guess, what my point was, is the way the story is told immediately suggests to me that this world is not necessarily our world. So I can forgive, especially given how crazy heightened every moment of the movie is, I can forgive that step missing, because we don't see any characters that aren't Mandy, Red, or somebody tied to the cult in one way or the other.
Right. I mean, with the exception of like the lumberjacks or whatever at the very beginning.
Right. But after that, once Red goes home from work, it's like he steps into another world. Like that opening really is the only section that really feels like that, and the scene with Bill Duke feels a little bit more grounded in our reality than the rest of the movie, but it's only moments. In those moments it feels like Red has stepped into something more closely resembling our world. Yeah. But the rest of the movie feels like it takes place just sort of half a step removed from our world in this weird psychedelic fantasy reality.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like at this point I have to say that, like, if you haven't seen it, we're probably going to get real spoilery.
I mean, I told you what the story is, so I already maybe we should like drop in a spoiler tag.
I mean,
before
but like we spoke in general terms, and like that's essentially the the synopsis logline. No specific details up to this point. But like, I feel like,
well, I suppose, right, the part of the plot that helped sell the movie is it's a revenge story where Nick Cage avenges the woman he loves by being as Nick Cagey as he possibly can.
Right. But like, I feel like we're going to get into, like, I think the biggest thing that can be spoiled are the individual moments.
Yes.
Like you were talking about how it's not necessarily about the plot of the story, but like, I feel like this especially with the way the story is told in 3 specific like chapters. It's about those scenes and those moments where essentially like that I feel like you have to experience for the first time without any additional context.
It is
presupposition.
Right. It really is. The only way to spoil this movie is to give away moments ahead of time. So go, if you haven't seen Mandy, pause this podcast, go, it's on VOD right now. Check it out. Come back.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, because you said you feel like it's in 3 chapters. I want to know what you feel like the 3 chapters are, because it's very clear that this is one story in at least 2 parts. Yeah. But to me, it happens like when, again, spoilers, after the cult burns Mandy alive, I feel like that's where the first chapter ends and the second chapter is Red and his revenge quest. What would you perceive as being the 3rd piece?
There are chapter cards. Like, there's the Shadow Mountains chapter card. Then we have Children of the New Dawn chapter card. And then we have the Mandy one.
Yes. It's interesting. I didn't necessarily perceive those as being chapters, although I guess, right, you could say there are act breaks there.
Right.
But it really does, in terms of the story being told, in terms of how much emphasis we're supposed to put on plot. Everything from the start of the movie to Mandy's death feels like it is one complete story in itself. And everything after that feels like it's another complete story to itself.
Well, because we don't get to that point until about an hour in.
Right.
So the first hour is essentially all set up, getting you adjusted to the platform of Mandy and Red and their simple life of like Red working, Mandy doing her like artwork, and then essentially that platform being turned upside down once you meet the Children of the New Dawn.
Right. And I want to talk a little bit about the opening, because when I told friend of the show, JQ Salazar, that we were going to be talking about Mandy, he and I got into a conversation about it, because for both of us, it was one of our favorite movies of last year. And we were talking about that opening section.
Yeah.
And how just the way they depict Red and Mandy's life together, how where they live seems completely detached from the rest of the world. It's completely isolated, and it's like the only thing that exists is them and their love and their home. And like the score reflects how, like we were talking about how the score is very tender, very sensual, and you see this vast expanse around their living space. And at the center of it, it is just their hearts and their love, and everything is perfect. It's almost like a psychedelic love. Mm-hmm. Like they fall into each other and they complement each other so completely, and they get to have you get these moments with them, like when they're talking about what is your favorite planet.
Yeah.
And I love that Nicolas Cage, who is very much in real life a massive comic book fan, says that his favorite planet is Galactus.
Right.
But he's not a planet, but he eats planets.
And you are what you eat.
But we were talking about, like Jay was talking about, how that feeling, and I'm interpreting what we were talking about, but he was talking about how that feeling hit him in a way very, very few things do. And I get it. Without knowing 100% where he's coming from, I understand this feeling of everything being so perfect, being so, like I said, almost psychedelically connected. But there is this danger that is encroaching. And if this perfect thing is completely ripped apart, and it's I don't know, like it affects me profoundly as well in ways that I also struggle to put my finger on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know if I've ever felt like a psychedelic piece to like relate to it in that, like, I feel like life is a ball of chaos and danger's always approaching. They call me Torrid Danger J. Miller. But I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Maybe maybe hypnotic would be a better word than I mean, I think psychedelic's the perfect word, but if you don't necessarily have a specific frame of reference, like hypnotic is just, and I think that's the word that Jay used as well, is hypnotic. But I think that maybe is more, if you've never had a psychedelic experience, maybe that's a bit more.
Right. Well, no, I guess the biggest or most accessible way I can kind of relate to that is that, like, as someone who lives with like anxiety and stuff, like any moment of like good, you always feel like there's like something bad on the perimeter. So like you can never really fully enjoy those like moments of like I guess just tranquility. So I guess that's the closest way I can find my way into it.
Right. And then imagine you get to a place where it feels safe and it feels whole and it feels almost psychedelically or hypnotically wonderful. And then that thing comes and destroys it anyway.
Right. Which, yes, you could imagine that, like, if you live in such a, like, I would say, like, a heavenly sphere of existence, and essentially hell on earth comes raging in.
Which, by the way, is some of the most metal shit. This sidebar, this is one of the most metal fucking movies I have ever seen.
Yeah. Well, it feels like it has very much like, and I know that it's intentional, that it has very much like an old heavy metal feel to it.
So you're talking about the look of it, right? And it does have this really specific old school feel. And to achieve that feel, they used the Arri Alexa camera, but they coupled it with the Panavision anamorphic format. And that gives it a very distinctive old school look.
Interesting. Like, but even the like animated segments, really, it reminds me of what is it Barbarella heavy metal. Yeah. It has that feel to it, or like old I can't remember the specific, like old like Norse style like heavy metal like album covers and things of that sort. It very much has that feel to it. And like once Nicolas Cage gets into like rage mode, you feel like that is it. Like you could almost like layer heavy metal onto it, and it would essentially coincide with any like Zeppelin song or like I don't know, black metal song or something to that effect.
You just roll some King Diamond over that shit.
Hell yeah. And it's like, I'm gonna kill the mutants, yeah. You ripped my shirt. That I didn't think we would get a like traditional Nicolas Cage scream.
Oh, we got it.
We did.
It's so funny, that moment, which is in the second half, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but in the behind the scenes, there's this moment where it's after a take of that scene where it's Nicolas Cage talking to Panos Cosmatos, and he's basically like, is that okay? Like, we could it's more of a statement than a quit. You ripped my shirt. It's an amazing little moment of watching the two of them try and finesse that specific moment. But so I do want to go back, though, and I want to talk a little bit more about the first half before we dive into the utterly bonkers second half of this movie. I want to talk about the Children of the New Dawn and their abduction of Mandy, and I want to talk a bit about Linus Roache's Jeremiah, because this character fascinates me.
Okay. What would you like to say about them? I mean, I feel like as someone who is coming into it real new, like I'm also really fascinated by we had a discussion about religion a few weeks ago, which like really kind of rang in my mind, because he's essentially like a cult leader.
Yes.
And he, like, as small as his cult is, like, he is essentially using it for his own gain. He's using it to, like, have sex with all the women he wants and to get as high as he wants. And like
just about every cult leader there's ever been.
Right. I mean, well, some of them are all about that sweet, sweet money, yo. They're all about, like, ooh, baby, give me that money, and then I'll take you to the next level.
But it's almost always dudes, and it's almost always for personal gain, whether it's money, sex, or frequently both.
Yeah. So I thought they did a really good job of like when you first meet them, you're just like, oh, it's just a group of people in a van. But like that scene where he's laying on the couch and he's talking to I forget the name of the older lady who was satisfying his needs. But he was talking to her, and then he was talking to Brother Swan about like needing this woman and feeling naked without her, and needing to have her brought to him.
Mother Marlene, by the way, is the older lady.
Got it. Mother Marlene. I have a lot to say about that character.
Awesome.
But that scene served to like really build that character, in that like he's this character who is super selfish, and like everyone is really trying to fulfill his every need. And there's this moment where he's like, if you talk back to me, you won't become clear, or something, like you won't reach the second level, or blah blah blah, whatever his terminology was. And that like cemented it as like he's not just a guy who these people like. He is a definitive cult leader.
Right.
And then having that scene end with Lucy coming in, this like really timid, scared girl, and you know that it's for gross sex stuff. Really, like, I feel like that was a masterclass in just like character building in a very succinct way.
Yes, and you first meet Jeremiah through the perspective of the cult, essentially, where they all buy in fully. Like, he's their guy, and they do his bit, like Manson style. Like, they will do his bidding, up to and very much including often folks.
Right.
But like many men who position themselves as heads of groups such as this one, there is not as much to Jeremiah as Jeremiah would like you to believe.
Yeah.
And part of why Mandy meets the fate that she does is once she's abducted and they drug her and they put her in a room with everybody where Jeremiah is basically like, who's the Carpenters? He's like, do you like the Carpenters? I think this is much better. And he puts on his own fucking album.
Yeah.
He's the dude who like picks up a girl at a bar, takes her home, and puts on his own shit.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, what do you think? You know, but that's literally what happens.
Right.
And he starts, derobing and kind of moving around in front of her and basically hyping himself up to a degree that the cultists have totally bought into.
Right.
But Mandy sees immediately, even completely drugged, and we get this cool visual element of everybody with the lines, you know what I mean? Like with this sort of like, the tracking effects on their arms and such. Even in that state, she sees how truly pathetic and small Jeremiah is, and she literally laughs in his face.
Oh, yeah.
Is a beautiful thing.
Right. And everyone knows what it's like to disrobe and a girl laughs at you. It feels terrible.
It doesn't feel
right,
great.
Everyone? Everyone knows. Everyone? I'm not alone. I mean, he's not alone. Damn. No.
But I do love the element of the tracer effects also.
Yes, I was going to ask if there's anything about in the behind the scenes about that. Like, I was wondering how much of it was practical and how much of it was like in post. Like, I imagine like if you wanted to do it practically, you'd essentially increase the exposure and you'd also like have the frame rate be a bit different.
Yeah.
And so that like creates that that kind of effect. But I guess you could also essentially create it in post. But I was wondering how much of that was practical, and not to say that you can answer that.
No,
cool.
if I had to guess, I would say it's a blend of both. I would say some of it is practical in terms of how it was shot, and some of it was certainly done in post.
Yeah.
But the effect is ultimately insanely trippy and very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts you very much in Mandy's state of mind, having been drugged and thrown into this room with these terrifying people.
Right. And the way that they drug her is insane. Like, not just that they give her this, could essentially be like hyper LSD, but they also have this giant wasp thing in a jar and sting her in the neck with it, which like brought my mind to the like tracker jackers in Hunger Games, because that's what when they like jack you, or like I forget what the term that they use that they did to PETA, where spoilers for Hunger Games.
Yeah, I'll cop to have my only exposure to Hunger Games was the first movie, which I saw one time in theaters, and I know nothing else.
Well, there's a thing that they do when they want to essentially brainwash you, where they like pump you full of tracker jacker venom, and then they like expose you to a bunch of stuff. So it was kind of like that. Guys, if you remember the specific phrase, tweet it at us at Missing Outcast, MISSINGOUTCAST.
Is PETA Josh Hutchison? Hutchy-Wutchy?
Yeah,
the Hutch.
Hutchy-Wutchy.
The Hutch. Call him the Hutch.
It's definitely not called being jacked off, but like it's something like that. So,
like, what is it like? Donald Sutherland is like, get into the woods and jack those kids off, and everybody's like, do we tell him?
Right. It took them 3 Hunger Games to realize exactly what he meant.
Right, like in the final movie, he's like, he goes, get into the woods and jack those kids off, and he finally looks around the room, and he goes, oh,
yeah,
I have to resign. And he wins. He resigns and they win.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works.
They topple the statue. They just now splice in footage from the end of Return of the Jedi where we go to all the planets. Everybody's celebrating. They're toppling the Palpatine statue, but we do really crude. Like, we just take a color image of Donald Sutherland and paste it on the statue. And then they make a whole other Hunger Games movie, and it's just 2 hours of footage of celebrations from other movies with the cast of the Hunger Games dubbing in their voices, being like, today is the day the Sutherland statue fell. They're just referring to him by his actor name.
Right, of course.
Only because I don't know the name of the character. In this film, they are canonically now breaking that fourth wall.
Of course.
And talking in celebratory terms about the day the Sutherland statue fell.
Yeah. Like, he was Snow until he resigned, and then they... Yeah. I was salvaging it for all the Twitter people who are getting their phones out being like, this motherfucker doesn't know who this was. I'm like,
Donald Snotherland. Donard, hello, I'm Donald Snotherland.
Mm-hmm. No relation to Donald Sutherland.
That's when I go to the SAG office trying to pose as Donald Sutherland. And I'm doing a really poor, like a conspicuously poor job of it.
Yeah.
Hello. Can I help you? Yes. I'm noted thespian Donald Snotherland. The guy at the desk just sort of looks up and he goes, get out. And I'm like, no, I'm Snotherland, but and I'm being carried away. But Donald.
And Kiefer like steps out of an elevator and goes, Dad?
And then as I'm being pulled away, I'm like, wait, what? Am I Donald Snotherland?
You've been Donald Snotherland this whole time.
Oh my goodness. I have such a nice beard.
You do.
It's all white.
I like it.
It's very classy.
Yeah.
I get to order people into the woods to jack off some kids.
Yep. Right before you
before I
retire.
Resign, and they take down the Donald Snotherland statue.
Oh man. But so
I wrote the Hunger Games, as you can no doubt surmise.
Yeah. It's obvious. Stop plugging your other works. We're here right now, okay? But I feel like this is a good chance for me to talk about Mother Marlene.
Yes, let's.
Because there's this character in the what I would describe as limited amount of time that you spend with her is very fascinating. Just in the way that her face works and in the way that like she's so devoted to Jeremiah that you get the idea that she is the former best girl.
Yes.
But like 2 girls removed. Like it was her, then it was Lucy, and now it's Mandy. Mm-hmm. And she just wants to be best girl right now, all the time, forever. And so there's just such resentment in her eyes and her tone as she's like getting Mandy because she's doing her duty, but she hates every moment of it. Right. And the way that this actress does it and the way that like she conveys it, because you want to know her story. Mm-hmm. You want to know how she got involved and how she became such a devout follower, and if she's also related to Jeremiah, because I feel like there's a little bit of that in there.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
But yeah, having been presumably that girl at some point in the maybe not even too distant past,
right,
and now being castigated to the role of den mother / recruiter, and now having to help Jeremiah recruit girls for the position that was yours, that presumably, if you're gonna follow this dude at all, you wanted.
Yeah, which is rough. I not to bring in other things, but like my roommate has recently been watching Surviving R. Kelly.
I'm hearing stuff about that.
Yeah, and there's a big implication that the girl who was featured in the P-tape is now basically a Mother Marlena for all his new abuse victims. So, like, she is essentially teaching everyone the, like, rules of his house and helping them stay in line. Which
so
is like,
so the R. Kelly sex cult rumors were not so much rumor as
no, they're real.
Yeah.
Like, R. Kelly should be in jail right now.
Because you heard this stuff for years and years, but it sounds so, until you hear the stories, it sounds so exaggerated. Like, we know about the pee stuff. We've known about the pee stuff for a long time.
Right.
We've known that was real for a very long time. But when people start saying stuff like sex cult, it's like, well, okay, what are those stories? Because without them, it's like, that sounds so big and weird that, is that true?
Yeah.
Apparently it's true.
I mean, it's very true. And, like, he's a known pedophile since, like, early 90s when he was, quote-unquote, married to Aaliyah, who was 15 at the time. The song Age Ain't Nothing But a Number is about their relationship. So fucking wrap your brain around that. But that is what that... Like, it kind of brings a reality to that character.
Yes.
And that, like, that is exactly how these, like, cults work, where once the leader is done with someone, they relegate them to another, a more quote unquote like leadership role,
right,
which is essentially further doing their bidding, helping them to continue with their abusive actions.
Which also tragically reflects the way society treats women in broad terms as well.
Yes. Woof.
Yeah. No, and like emphasis on tragically, because it's fucking horrible.
Right. I mean, because you could even get into the idea of like not even in terms of just like quote like overt abuse, but like the whole like thing in Hollywood where once you reach a certain age, like you are either you take these fucking old woman mom roles or your career is done.
Right.
Like, your career is dictated for you, which has been changing over the last couple decades. Like, it's been great that like women have been able to take back their agency in the industry, but like for a very long time, like you get all the stuff that had been coming out once Weinstein was exposed, that like all these women's careers were tanked because they wouldn't submit to his advances, and like having that much power over the people's futures, and so like there's this point that like you sit down and you're like, whatever happened to this person? And then you look it up and you realize she like was essentially blackballed because she wouldn't go down on someone, or like all that shit.
Should have had a career,
right,
and was denied that because they would not submit to the whims of a monstrous person in a position of power.
Yeah,
which is not dissimilar from a cult.
Right.
But like, at least in the case of Children of the New Dawn, these fuckers presumably opted into this cult.
Right.
Whereas nobody opted into the cult of Weinstein. They were essentially forced into that position.
Yeah. Oof.
Woof.
So yeah, and that like the character makes me ask these questions about like how these people got involved, where they all met Jeremiah, where they all started. Like, I don't imagine that they've been stationed in this town for super long time. Like, I mean, I guess they've been working there long enough to have the chemist and the bikers and all that stuff for a little while, but like,
and I want to talk about the chemist and the bikers.
Oh, we
too.
will.
Yeah.
But like, I guess I'm still just super fascinated with the structure of this cult, because most people are about the same age or older than Jeremiah, so it's not like he found these kids and were like, yo, you're mine now, I'm gonna teach you my ways. Like, at some point he, I guess, being charismatic or having drugged these people, essentially indoctrinated them somehow, and the movie leaves that open to your interpretation how that happened. but it's really fascinating, especially because of how much you get from the performances.
Yeah, I love how much backstory, mythology is suggested by this movie.
Yeah.
And I love how little of it fills in. Like, very clearly, whether it's that the history of the relationships between the cultists, or the history of Red and Mandy's relationship, or the history between Red and Carruthers, the Bill Duke character, who's been holding on to his Red sniper crossbow, which he left in mint condition. What is that story?
Yeah.
Or what is the mythology involving like the Horn of Apraxis and the bikers, who also look like these weird Hellraiser demon monsters?
Mm-hmm.
I love that it really does feel like Panos Cosmatos and the co-writer Aaron Stewart really did think all of this through.
Yeah.
And then held a lot of it back. And I really like that about it. I really like that it then, like, I want the answers, but I never want the answers.
Right.
It's so much fun to speculate and try and fill in the blanks and connect the dots myself than to have it all explained to me.
Yeah, and they like give you just enough to kind of hang your hat on, if that's a phrase that people use. Because like with the bikers, they give what one man's like tall tale is, where you hear that once they got such a hyper dose of LSD that like they went crazy, but could be true. It could just be that they were insane to begin with. And then you get a little bit of like Mandy and Red's origin, and that like you get a small flashback to when he met her and he's like wearing that 44 t-shirt,
right?
And you're like, haha, I get it.
And that's
why it's his favorite.
Yep.
Yeah. But beyond that, like, and I don't know if you necessarily need more.
No, I agree completely. I don't think you do at all.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that more isn't there. I think it is, like I said, I think it's so much more interesting to put all of those pieces in place and then let trust the audience enough.
Right.
And trust that the audience will hopefully enjoy filling in some of those pieces for themselves.
Yeah. So let's dive into the bikers. Because they, I assume if you're listening now, you've seen this movie.
Yes, and the bikers feature more prominently in the second half.
Right.
After Mandy, seeing Jeremiah for the small, pathetic man that he truly is, laughs in his face, and as punishment, she's put in a bag and burned alive in front of Red, who has been bound with barbed wire and forced to watch.
Yeah.
It's gnarly.
It is. And Nicolas Cage does a really great job of like just displaying how much torment he is in watching the love of his life being burned alive and like being so helpless to do so.
We talk a lot as a culture about how crazy and big Cage's performances are, and they certainly are that. But what I feel like frequently gets lost in those same conversations is dude is a hell of an actor.
Yeah.
When he chooses to ground himself in emotional reality, the dude is a heck of a performer.
Right.
I mean, he's a heck of a performer regardless. Just, you know what I mean.
No, I know it. Like, well, yes. I mean, and he's won Oscars and stuff like that. Like, he has, and to hear him talk about, like, the reasons behind his choices are really interesting. Like, he did this video for, I think it was Vanity Fair, where he's going through his different movies and he's talking about like big moments from those movies and like all the classic cinema that inspired the choices he made behind the characters. He's like, this character does a really loud scream, which is a remnant of this other movie I'd watched a long time ago, because like the character himself had this weird face, and then that face is what I thought about while I was doing the character, and then the scream just came from the face.
So at first I was like, wow, that Cage is pretty good, and then it gradually slid into Edgar from Men in Black.
Oh God, I wanna go or water.
But like that, it's his knowledge of classic cinema and his reference points are really interesting. Like I think without those reference points, like his acting can seem very erratic and very like just big choices for big choice sake.
Right.
But I think that all of them have a very specific reason behind them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that makes him a great match with Panos Cosmatos as well, because it seems very much like that's Cosmatos' approach to storytelling, is taking all of these reference points, stuff that he genuinely loves, whether it is like imagery from the cover of metal albums or elements that he pulled from horror movies, like very much like B-movie, schlocky, gory things that he then gives the A-list treatment to.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, to me, there's almost no clearer example of this, of him taking something that he loves, throwing it in and remixing the entire thing. And maybe I'm just making an assumption that's baseless and it's a coincidence, but there is a chainsaw duel in this movie that feels like he watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, saw Dennis Hopper dueling Leatherface with some chainsaws, and went, how can I make this 10 times bigger? You know, how can I go for it 10 times harder than Hooper and company did back then?
Right.
And to the extent that we literally have a chainsaw that's the length of a massive sword.
Right.
Like if you played Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, you remember the Goron sword, the big Goron sword that was about twice as big as you are? That, but a chainsaw.
Yeah, it's this insane moment where like Nicolas Cage already has a chainsaw in his hand, and
Yes,
then this
and we
guy,
set up the chainsaw in the opening.
right?
Also, sidebar: opening title song is by King Crimson, which is dope.
Oh, interesting.
If you've never listened to King Crimson, you should. If you don't listen to King Crimson, you've still probably heard King Crimson. Kanye West samples King Crimson track on Power. The sample that goes 21st century schizoid man. That's King Crimson.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Go listen to like listen to King Crimson. It's dope. Anyway, they set up the chainsaw real early. And once Nick Cage gets himself out of the barbed wire, he starts putting essentially an arsenal together for himself. But the very first thing he does is go back into the house and chug a fuck ton of vodka.
Yeah,
Just chug it.
He like chugs it, pours it on his wounds, and then screams gutturally, and then chugs some more.
To be fair, he's had a rough day, and I bet it really hurts to drink vodka that fast.
Probably. I mean, it probably hurts more to pour it on your stupid wounds.
But you know, you have to sterilize the wound somehow. That does probably hurt a lot.
Right. I would imagine. And then he's probably also thinking about the cheddar goblin as he's like chugging it.
That's right, the cheddar goblin. If they make Mandy 2, I want it to be all about him fighting the cheddar goblin.
Really, I would want the cheddar goblin to be like his imaginary friend that's always on his shoulder being like, you gotta kill him, Johnny, you gotta kill him. And then he just starts vomiting mac and cheese everywhere. And he's like, okay, I can do it. I'll do it.
Like at the very end of the movie, at the very end of Mandy, when he's driving off into what looks like this heavy metal fantasy hellscape, he envisions Mandy sitting in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
So the sequel picks up right there, and over the course of the movie, Mandy very gradually devolves into the cheddar goblin.
Mm-hmm.
So it all ties together. It makes perfect sense.
Right, of course.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
Totally tracks.
Because like if there was an actual sequel, it would be about either more the cult trying to get revenge on Nicolas Cage for killing their messiah and him having to like defend himself, or it's about the police that were never contacted coming after him because they believe he killed his wife, and then all this cult people.
Right. It's just a lot of the police standing around going, what the? It's just 2 hours of what the?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on here? I don't know what's going on here at all.
Right.
What the? But also, there really can't be.
And then Nicolas Cage radios in and he's like, watch the first movie.
I'm more of a treasure protector. But there really couldn't be revenge on behalf of the cultists because he pretty well and good revenges all of the cultists to death.
Right, but maybe there was like a side cult, like the van was just leaving a conference where Jeremiah just gave a big speech, and then he's like, I guess it's time to go home.
Right.
And then so then the first frame of the next movie is the people going home from their conference getting a letter because it's the 80s, or a phone call because it's the 80s, at their homes because it's the 80s, and being like, Jeremiah's dead, and they were killed by some fucking guy named Red. And then they're like, where do we find this Red? And that's the beginning of Mandy 2.
He's searching for the Declaration of Independence because it's got a map on the back. And he's just making the big manic grin face that he makes at the very end of the movie the entire time.
Yeah.
And occasionally he just mutters, treasure protector.
And then the goblin's like,
macaroni and cheese. But so all right, moving into sort of the final phase of this movie.
Yeah.
Because he grabs his crossbow, and then the next thing he does, and it is maybe the most metal thing I've ever seen on screen.
haha.
As the damn it. All right, I'm going home.
Yeah, you'll get it. You'll get it in 1 second.
But true. It is true on multiple levels, I suppose. But the most heavy metal thing maybe that I've seen in a movie, certainly, stop making that face. Certainly of any movie of 2018, Nicolas Cage chooses as his primary tool a battle axe that he forges himself.
Mm-hmm.
It rocks.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I feel like at this point, like we're still in a pretty grounded movie, with the exception because like he goes and gets his crossbow, and you're like, all right, fine, maybe he hunts, and then he's like, I'm gonna forge an axe, which with a what is it called, like a mold that I already have,
Right.
With metal from everywhere, I guess, right. And like it's as if this character has been waiting for this moment. He's like, I hope that Mandy gets killed so I can really use this. Or this is his like third revenge quest. He's like, I hope no. It's like in the newer X-Men, how they have to keep killing people that Magneto loves to make him evil.
Right.
It's like that.
We introduce a family. We introduce a family for Magneto in Apocalypse for no reason other than to kill them to motivate the character.
Right. And so like I feel like he has been on like 6 murder quests before, and his old friend used to go on them with him, but he got, I don't know, hit in the spine and is paralyzed now, and so he's like, I can't go on from the bottom down. I feel like
from the bottom down.
Yeah. Oh, wasn't he? No, he wasn't in a wheelchair.
Also,
paraplegic.
You can't get paralyzed from the bottom down because that would be the floor. Yeah. That'd be
the whole floor.
Just the padding of the soles of my feet are numb.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what that would mean.
Everything he touches with his feet becomes paralyzed. It's his new special power.
It's like a really shitty King Midas.
Yes. It's all of his wood floors are so weak. That's why he lives in a trailer, I guess. No. Anyways, yeah. So like he already has all the things to make this battle axe, which I don't understand, but I don't need to understand, because obviously, if we're on the way to go fight some LSD bikers,
some
why
LSD
not?
demon bikers,
yeah.
But right, and at that point, look, at this point in the movie, you're either on board or you're not. I don't think the battle axe and the lack of backstory for the battle axe is going to be what loses somebody at that point in the movie.
Well, I mean, that moment is the turning point where you essentially, from the moment he starts making the battle axe, you're like, all right, this is a different movie.
Yep.
Because it's pretty grounded until you get to that point, because like the demon bikers are scary, but like they're not necessarily like demon bikers at that point.
Right.
They're just like a gang of bikers who wear weird clothes. But the moment he makes the battle axe is when you're descend into hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it at that point you're like, all right, I'm on board or I'm turning this movie off. Like that's where you gotta be.
Right. My one thing would be I have a hard time imagining that somebody would make it that far and then go, this is where you've lost me. Not the scene where they drug her and Jeremiah pulls his dick out. I was so there for that. But no, the axe. Can't. You lost me.
I mean, him pulling his dick out informs the character. The axe
that
is
doesn't inform
ancillary. It informs me in a way that like I don't. It like brings more questions than it does like answers, and it's just like I feel like it is a jumping point. It's a point that you got to take a leap.
For me, I guess we do start leaping there, but the even bigger leap comes once he starts to track down and fight the bikers.
Yeah.
They capture him, and he finds their jar of super LSD.
Yes, this was a moment.
It's less a jar and more a bucket.
Yeah, this is LSD. A part of a large string of behaviors that Red starts doing that I highly don't appreciate. Which is
he's pretty fucked up by the end of this thing.
Yeah, I get it. But like so there's a moment when there's broken glass and what we assume is cocaine, but we don't know.
Right. He does
it could
all
be
the coke,
it could have just been like flour. It could have been like ground up drywall, but he literally like picks it up and is like, this is mine now, and like fucking shoves it in his face. And then he finds this jar of what could be like, I don't know, glue. He smells it and is like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to put it in my mouth. And it's like, dude, stop. Stop putting things in your face. I need you to like, you have a singular cause. Just do that. Stop putting things that don't belong in your face there. I don't need it.
He's going beyond the event horizon, bro. A sober man cannot do what he needs to do. You need to be as fucked up as possible so that you feel nothing but the blind psychedelic rage to motivate your vengeance. Especially though, not for nothing, right? Like in the conversation with Carruthers, like Carruthers makes it pretty clear that his odds of survival are pretty poor. So I would imagine he goes into this scenario being like, look, I'm almost certainly going to die. So let me get so fucked up that I can literally not feel pain and take as many of these fuckers down with me as I possibly can.
Right.
That I totally buy. And not for nothing, Tari. He's had a rough day. Come now.
Well, I mean, what I do when I have a rough day is I play that song Bad Day, and I just go, this guy gets me.
I really want you to cut that song into Mandy. Like as he's chainsaw dueling.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of which, I want to talk about the action scenes in this movie. And yes, like again, I was having a conversation with Jay about it, and he was talking about how for him the second half, though he loves the second half, works a little bit less well because a lot of it works on one level.
Yeah.
But I think it hits so dang hard that I am certainly not bothered by that. I don't think he is either, but it works on fewer levels, but it aims to work on fewer levels than the first half does.
Right.
But I really want to talk about the action because what is incredible to me is a couple of these action sequences, both the fight with the kind of spiky demon biker by the flaming car and also the chainsaw duel. They had one night each to shoot these.
Oh, really?
These are action scenes that a regular production, your average production, would take a week or more to shoot, and they had one night. And the fact that they were able to pull these sequences off in one night of shooting is staggering to me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, I had read that like the director describes it was as hell on earth shooting those scenes. I mean, I guess it helps continuity that like that the room that they were fighting in was already messy, so they're like, fuck it, yeah, it's messed up. But like, yeah, there was a lot. I can't even imagine trying to plan for those scenes.
If you have that little time to shoot, you need to rehearse, choreograph, work it, because
right.
you've got a matter of hours effectively.
Did they explain why they had so little time?
My guess would be budget.
Okay.
Because the more days it takes, the more money it costs.
That's true.
And these are probably, action sequences tend to cost, especially if you're going to make them look all pretty and stuff.
Yeah.
So I would guess it was mostly a budgetary, obviously a time constraint thing, but a time constraint thing is a direct byproduct of a budget thing would be my guess.
Yeah. It's interesting. That fight with the spike penis biker. Because like when the preamble to it, you see the two dead bodies of the people who probably owned this house before, and like the guy, his butt is bloody, and you're like, did they like assault this dude to death? And then
I feel like they make this fairly explicit.
I mean, they did, like,
in a fairly explicit way.
It was very, very much implied, and then you like it. Then it's very overt.
Well, you literally see the knife dick.
Well, yes, I meant like before, like leading up to it.
Right.
Like as he's walking through the house, and you hear the porno, and then you see the bloody butt, and you're like, huh.
You know
and
what? I could actually buy the bloody knife dick being the bailing point for some folks. I could actually see that. I could see some people getting that far into the movie and then going, nah.
I mean,
like, you don't see it doing anything.
Yeah.
It's left to the imagination, and it's just a big phallic knife between somebody's legs.
Right.
But I could see where some people might have a hard time. Jesus.
It's not my fault that your commentary is so cutting. It's very sharp. Yeah, it was a lot. And then we get the firefight where like one of the bikers has essentially set his car on fire, and they have a punching match, and the guy is just like taunting him the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Before he catches on fire, continues to fight, and then is beheaded. Oh, this was another thing that fucking this Red does that that drove me crazy.
Okay.
So from the very beginning, Red is a smoker. So like at the end of that fight, he lights a cigarette off of the guy's burning, decapitated head.
Which, not for nothing, is maybe the most comic book thing that I've seen comic book fan Nicolas Cage do in a movie, including Kick-Ass, where he's dressed like Batman.
Right.
Because there is nothing more Wolverine than lighting a cigar on the flames of the havoc you just wrought.
Right. But this character, every time they finish a cigarette, they literally throw it into the forest. And I hate, as someone who like works in the forest, you should know, but maybe this character hates the forest.
He cuts down trees.
He cuts down trees.
He's cutting down the forest.
So like this, every time he smokes a cigarette, he like starts a fire hazard every time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm trying to have sympathy for you, sir, but you are making it very hard by literally throwing fire into a forest. I'm like, I'm almost there, and then you just ruin it every time.
He knows the forest so well that he knows exactly where to throw it, so it lands in a very like wet area of the forest.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. He knows it's where he works, man. It's his world.
Sweet. Yeah. He's like, I'm giving it back to the land.
He doesn't. He just like throws it back over his shoulders, like, I know there's a puddle back there.
Jeez. But yeah, so I like how I didn't realize until I was reading later that the scene with the guy with the tiger was the chemist. I didn't know who he was.
It's an odd scene.
Yeah, because like the way it starts is you see Nicolas Cage like draped in shadow,
right? And
you see this guy lit only by the flames of his whatever he's doing. And you see a tiger in a cage.
Yes. The chemist is played by Richard Brake, who a lot of people would. I mean, you've seen his face, you know his work, even if you don't know his name. I feel like a lot of folks would know him as Joe Chill from Batman Begins.
Was he also Rorschach? No, he wasn't Rorschach.
No, Jackie Earle Haley was Rorschach.
Yes, correct.
He was on. I know he was on Thrones for a minute too.
Yes,
but he's big body of work. You definitely know his face, even if you don't know the name.
Right. And then this begins this sequence of him like doing a spiel. He just starts doing a spiel.
Yeah. What did you make of this?
Since I didn't know who he was, I didn't know if he was a friend of of Nicolas Cage's being like him being like, I got one more stop to make before I go do my last thing. So I was a little confused by it. 'Cause like he starts doing which I imagine are a bunch of references to heavy metal lyrics, and Nicolas Cage is silent the whole time. Then he lets his tiger go, which I took to mean that he's like, I'm making peace with dying. And now there's a rampant tiger loose in the forest, and someone's gonna die later. But no, let's not talk about that. We'll talk about it in Mandy too.
I kept thinking about with the tiger. I kept thinking about the lyrics from Holy Diver by Dio.
Oh yeah,
where he's like, "Ride the tiger, you can see his stripes, but you know he's clean."
Yeah,
I kept it, and that could have nothing to do with why the tiger's there, but it's all I could think about every shot of the tiger.
I mean, but it could also be exactly why it was a tiger, because I had read that it was originally supposed to be a lizard, which you could imagine is why it's named Lizzie.
Right.
But then the day that they were shooting, the director was like, it's a tiger now.
Get me a tiger. I need a tiger by 1 p.m. 1 p.m. tiger.
I mean, and it would be crazy. Like, I wouldn't put it past this movie, especially at this point, that like the last scene, Nicolas Cage comes riding in on that tiger,
swinging the
axe, and there's like a freeze frame, and it's the album cover of some fucking metal album,
and Jeremiah's like, I can see his stripes, but I know he's clean.
So I thought it was a weird moment. I couldn't make heads or tails of it in the moment. And then once I had the context of that being the chemist, I was like, oh, got it. It was the next stop on the murder train.
Right. But what I do find interesting is that so presumably the chemist is the one who's making like the tainted super LSD, for example, possibly, yeah. Or at least he's in that mix somewhere. Like dude's not making like over the counter like children's Tylenol,
right?
You know, but I also find it interesting that he points red towards the children of the New Dawn instead of away from them.
Yeah.
So who I don't know what's up with this dude.
I mean, I don't think he has any alliances. I think he's just like, especially if he's known as the chemist, he's probably like, I just like mixing things. Ooh yeah, I just like to make new cool stuff. And then now that he's part of the murder train, which maybe he got to survive, who knows? But like, I imagine he's like, yeah, you know, like they give me money or whatever they give me. I have no loyalties, so like, take care of them.
Right.
They're monsters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could buy that.
Right.
But it is a little bit ambiguous.
Right. So I thought that whole sequence was real weird, but like not above the weirdness that has already taken place. So I was like, all right, this sequence is happening.
But it is a little bit more ambiguous than I think a lot of the rest of the movie plays.
Right. I think it's because we don't get, like, in all the other scenes, I feel like we get a bit more context, whereas, like, I feel like there's a missing scene. Either, like, Nicolas Cage flipping over that jar, and it has, like, the chemist and his address, and he's like, okay, my next stop. Right. Or something. But, like, yeah, it happened. But it ultimately leads us to our final destination after the chainsaw fight, which is like we get back to Mother Mabel.
I like you know what I like that. We'll go with Mother Mabel.
Yeah, sure. Mother Mabel.
It's Mother Marlene.
Mother Marlene. We get to Mother Marlene, and she is essentially trying to seduce Nicolas Cage, and it's weird, the cinematography at the end of this scene. I was like, did he partake? Did he? Because she's like, I can show you all the pleasure. I know how to read bodies.
I can show you the world shining, shimmering, splendid.
And he's like, don't you dare close your eyes.
Don't you dare close your eyes. Take off my shirt. I really want. I really want somebody to just drop that into a whole new world. Exactly the same song, same lovely, lovey-dovey melodics, and then Aladdin just turns on her, just like, don't you dare close your eyes.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the song, it still but she sounds a little nervous.
Yeah.
She's no longer feeling safe on this
course
magic
not.
carpet.
I think there's an SNL skit about that. I'll tweet it out, guys.
Why am I not writing for SNL then?
Well,
How do I
don't
know
know.
I'm not? Maybe
It's
it was
true.
me.
Yeah. When you go to the credits, it says Donald
Sutherland.
But yeah, and so like we get to the final scene with Red and Jeremiah exposes himself as like the weaselly coward he is.
Right, the small, pathetic scumbag that Mandy saw him for immediately.
Right.
He literally begs for his life, going so far as to offer to fillet Red in exchange for sparing him.
But like, why would he want that? Like, that's like if someone was like, "Give me all your money," and you're like, "I have my old baby teeth." It's like, I don't want that. It's a currency that he doesn't.
I don't know if that's a 1-to-1.
I think it's a 1-to-1. I think it's a currency that he's definitely not interested in.
I don't think we're meant to read it as a genuine offer for Red to consider. I think we're meant only to see even more of how pathetic Jeremiah is, because that's where you go when you have nothing else to barter and you are so desperately desperate,
right,
and scared and small. It's like, please, I'll suck your dick. It's this dude.
I like to read it as a genuine offer. He's like, it's what everyone wants. It's my heart's desire, so I'm gonna give it to you. Accept this gift in exchange for my life. And he's like, I don't want your baby teeth.
Baby teeth. Red's like, I gotta talk to my lawyers. But yeah, he further exposes. Well, no, he hadn't exposed himself. It's just Mandy saw right through. Well, he did expose himself, but he didn't expose his character, his true character. Right. Mandy just immediately saw through all of his bullshit. But finally, in his final moments, Jeremiah very much exposes himself for the very pathetic small man he is.
Right.
And then Nick Cage crushes his head.
Yeah, and his little eyeball pops out. It's cool.
Crushy crush.
So
nice prosthetic.
Yeah, it's practical. It was nice.
And then Red gets back in his car, having completed his revenge quest, hallucinates his departed love in the passenger seat, and then just speeds off to who knows where. But we get these incredible final shots of this big, fantastical heavy metal hellscape, and who knows, man, after you take that LSD, who knows if you ever come back. So maybe that's his existence now.
Yeah, I'd like to imagine he wasn't even driving. I'd like to imagine that he like sat in the car and all of him driving is just in his head, and he's sitting there and he's like just passed out on top of the steering wheel. And that's the end of the movie. It's real sad.
Oh,
he's had a day.
It's the thing, right? It's the thing where like once people started talking about how you could read the ending of Taxi Driver as a dying fantasy, people start to try and ascribe that to everything they possibly can.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. It sounds like a Reddit forum where people are like, but he's like dead. And it's all just a fantasy. They kill him with the barbed wire, and the rest of the movie is just his.
Not even the rest of the.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm saying that's what I'm reminded of, is people trying to blindly ascribe this wherever they possibly can.
That's true. I mean, he did literally get stabbed in the side.
He did,
and so he never sewed that up. So he was like bleeding out that whole time. So like if
he
you were to
vodka
say
on it, it's fine.
Oh yeah, totally. No. It's not how it works. We are pretty much out of time, yo. So you got any last thoughts before we wrap?
This movie's bonkers. It is some of the metalist shit you will see on a screen. It is far and away one of my favorite movies of 2018, and much like our friend JQ Salazar, I would love to live in this world. I don't want to know these people. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
I don't want to know any of these people.
Right.
But I kind of want to live in a world that is that hypnotic and psychedelic and trippy and metal.
Interesting. I don't want to live in this world.
I don't want to know any of these people. That is an
Yeah.
important caveat. I don't mean
Right.
the world and the circumstances of Mandy.
No, I don't want that either.
I don't want any part of that. That's
Yeah.
horrifying. But the aesthetics of this world and the mood of this world, I would love to inhabit that.
Yeah. I recommend it. I feel like if you're on the train that a lot of people are on where they're like,
Nicolas Cage has lost his mojo.
he hasn't.
Dude
It's great.
just loves to work, and I feel like the big difference here, and this does happen, but I feel like a lot of filmmakers don't know how to harness the bigness of his choices.
Right.
I feel like Panos Cosmatos like let Cage crank it to 30
Yeah.
and knew how to harness and focus it in a way that really did help elevate the movie.
Yeah, I think that they've been trying to shoehorn him into movies he doesn't belong. Whereas, like, if you can complement his acting style, then I think that is the best case scenario. Like, when you put him in stuff like Face Off, where like that is prime Cage.
Yes.
He excels. So like, dude, just keep putting him in bonker stuff. Like, oh, dude, like even fucking Kick-Ass. Just give him good stuff to work
Where
with.
he's like, kryptonite! While he's on, spoilers, while he's being burned, he's just screaming, kryptonite! Because I guess that's the name of their plan?
Right, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man. But if people want to talk to you about Mandy a little bit more, where can they find you, Home Skillet?
I am on Twitter and Instagram at the Lex Michael.
Awesome. I am at Tari J. That's TaurijAY on Twitter and Instagram. You can find this podcast both on Twitter and Instagram. We just made it an Instagram, so you can follow us on that. That would be amazing. It is at Missing Outcast. That's MissingOutcast. You can also hit us up on the Missing Out hotline. It is 978-MISS-OUT. Let us know what you're into. Let us know what you thought of Mandy. All that jazz. We also love hearing from you guys. We got a few more ratings. They were 5 stars. No reviews, but like, you know who you are. So thank you for supporting the show.
For sure. We love you too.
Yeah, oh my gosh. We love you so much. So thank you for supporting us, and we hope you continue to do so. We're trying to make sure to keep bringing you content that you love. If there's anything that you would like us to cover this year, let us know on Twitter or on Instagram or on the hotline or wherever, and we will do our darndest to get to it. So that is our show for this week. We will see you next week. You've been filled in. That's my new catchphrase. That's my new catchphrase.
That's inappropriate. That's not going to play.
No.
It's not going to play in Peoria.
Oh, we're filling you in. You got filled in by missing out. Oh, yeah.
I promise this is not going to be
It's
our official sign-off.
It's our reoccurring catchphrase.
Please tune in next week. Please.
So you can get filled in.
That's not
Everyone loves to get filled in.
That's not true of everyone.
Oh, yeah.
It's really upsetting.
Did you know a turkey puppet once ran for the presidency of Ireland? Did you know that meat once rained from the skies of Kentucky? Did you know that there was an emperor of the United States for a while? Then listen to the Wiki Ship Down podcast.
We live in an age when the sum total of humanity's knowledge can be found in your pocket on a smartphone at any given time. But when that knowledge is peer editable, like it is on Wikipedia, what does that say about mankind? So follow us down the digital rabbit hole as we drink, joke, and curse our way through the random button on Wikipedia and see where our journey through humanity's knowledge takes us.
While you're at it, follow us on all social media at WikiShipDown. I'm Ruth Ann.
I'm Ryan, and be sure to find us every Wednesday on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to podcasts.